See, that's going to be a loud noise that will be a spike that I will unfortunately think is the clap.
This is Libby Road and the Sound Epistemology Podcast. This episode of the podcast continues with the Street Epistemology Survey series and ideas about how we understand truth. When to abandon beliefs was one subject we cover in episode 22. We also talk about faith, Comic-Con, fairy blood, how to talk to kids about Santa Claus, and how we should treat beliefs held by other people. Here's number 22. I will abandon a belief if I discover reliable information that falsifies it. I say strongly agree, and you say agree.
And I agree.
Yeah, this is interesting because I don't feel like I have the choice to continue believing something that I discover reliable information falsifies it. I think if I discover reliable information that falsifies a belief, I have no choice but to abandon it.
Right. This is where we get down to choice again.
Yeah.
Choosing to believe or not.
Right. Yeah. I have no choice but to abandon beliefs that I discover reliable information which falsifies it. I think that's why I strongly agree.
Yeah, and I think it gets into faith a little bit because there's like this blind faith sort of element, power of imagination, power of visualization type thing that I think is called for in, spell casting, praying, manifesting, I want to say in gratitude, but maybe not. Maybe what I'm thinking is of the Neville Goddard approach of imagining the thing that you wish already being fulfilled. That takes visualization, it takes a belief, it takes a confidence. Call it a false confidence if you want. It takes embodying the confidence of that state being fulfilled and then waiting for external reality to catch up with that.
External reality catches up with a belief if you visualize it enough.
A felt state. Yeah, that's the concept with the...
So that goes back to the other question about belief without action affects objective reality.
Yeah, and I would argue that is action because you're focused on on being in that future state of accomplishment.
Right, that's taking an action.
That's taking an action,
right.
Yeah.
So the question is, belief without taking an action affects objective reality.
That question was. This is
a
different question, but
yep.
And so there are some beliefs that I will not abandon if I discover reliable information that falsifies it.
There's some beliefs that you currently hold that you'll believe no matter what?
That I'll believe even if I'm given reliable information that falsifies it.
Yeah.
But I only agree. I think that only goes so far. or I do agree, I should say. So I don't disagree, I don't strongly disagree. I think it's probably more common that reliable information will lead me to realize my belief doesn't hold merit. But I do think there's times when I will hold a belief, even if I do discover reliable information that falsifies it.
Do you see any downsides to that? Do you see any downsides to remaining or continuing to hold a belief that you've been presented with reliable information that falsifies it?
There can be some downsides to that, definitely. Yeah, it's a grip on reality issue, interacting with other people that are in a space where the reliable information to them is more pertinent and solid than to me. I'll give you a good example.
Mm-hmm.
You ever been to Comic-Con?
No, but I'd like to.
Right? You would though, wouldn't you?
I would love to be a fly on the wall at Comic-Con. Or I would love to be in a costume that I could observe everyone and no one could tell that I was just observing everyone.
You're an outsider.
Like my Stig costume is my favorite
Mm-hmm.
because people can't see what I'm looking at.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm able to maybe stare and look at somebody longer than what is a social norm.
Yeah.
Because it's Halloween, usually. But anyway, sorry. Go ahead.
No, just
Comic-Con.
that. Just that. Wouldn't it be a shittier world if that didn't exist? If there wasn't that outlet for... Clearly there's reliable information that falsifies some of these people's beliefs, but thank goodness they believe the things they do, so that they go to such extremes to imitate these things they believe, to emulate some of these concepts that they believe and embrace, that we get this incredible experience of people exhibiting themselves in...
What's the belief that is not accurate in that case?
That Doctor Who is real, that Superman is real. I mean...
Them dressing up like Doctor Who.
Well, you talked about fairies earlier.
Okay, yeah.
The belief in fairies.
Yeah. Well, what does that have to do with Comic-Con? Or dressing up like a fairy?
Fucking guarantee you there's someone that's dressed up like a fairy that is under the assumption that they've got fairy blood.
And you want them to believe that fairies are real?
I don't want them to. I'm saying they do.
Right, but so do you think that they should abandon the belief that fairies are real?
No. I think
You
that would
want
be a
them to
sad world
continue-
if they did.
You want them to continue believing that fairies are real?
I want them to do what they want to do, but I'm glad that they believe it. I'm glad there's space in reality for them to be able to believe it, and me to be able to maybe hang out with that person, or just feel comforted that that person exists and there's that level of creativity in this world.
What if they dressed up like a fairy, but they did not hold the belief that fairies are real?
Then it'd be a cool costume.
Would that be better than for them to be believing that fairies are real?
I don't think it would be worse or better. They might not be as passionate about it, but...
Do you think that if somebody holds the belief that fairies are real, can lead to beliefs that may not be benign?
It could do. It could do. There's definitely some things that come out of Comic-Con that you could argue are not benign.
Okay.
For the most part, that's not the case. And we're just picking on Comic-Con, on cosplay, but
Sure.
that's a phenomenon. There's a lot of phenomenons, abandonment wouldn't be dissimilar to a collection of beliefs that there's reliable information that falsify it, but I'm glad those beliefs are out there. And I'm glad these people don't abandon them.
See, I would prefer, and I want to say that I think everybody should have the right to believe whatever they're convinced of. How they act on those beliefs, that's a different story. But it would be my preference that the person that believes fairies are real at Comic-Con would not hold that belief without sufficient evidence. I would prefer that their beliefs line up with reality, because if they believe that fairies are real and fairies are not real, then what else are they going to believe using that same reasoning that isn't necessarily as benign as...
I can see why you'd have that preference, yeah.
Yeah, and that's just a preference. I'm not going to go to Comic-Con and tell everybody I see there that they need to believe different things. Like that's not what I'm trying to say. I'm saying that it would be that I would prefer people believe more true things and less false things. That would be my preference, just in general.
And that's where you strongly agree. And I only agree because I celebrate that there's enough people that don't abandon their beliefs.
You celebrate people believing things that aren't true.
Some of those. When it comes to something creative and fun like that, I'm really glad that there are people that haven't abandoned those beliefs despite all the evidence contrary to it. I think it makes us a more interesting experience.
Yeah, it's certainly interesting.
And I think that someone can have a belief that fairies, or someone can have any one or two beliefs that are so far-fetched as to be ridiculous to most people's definition of what reality is. And it doesn't harm anyone. It doesn't cause them to have poor judgment at other things that need their critical thinking.
How could you tell?
I suppose you'd have to engage them and find out where they're coming from. If they are loony, or if they just have this loony belief or two that they don't want to hear what you have to say about reality. They believe it anyway. And then when you ask them about how human beings should be treated, that they have some critical thinking involved in their responses to those kind of questions.
And you want to celebrate that up to a point.
Yeah, up to a point, yeah. Because I do agree, let's remember, that I will abandon a belief if I discover reliable information that falsifies it. I don't strongly agree, but I do agree.
How do you decide when it's okay for somebody to be believing something that's not true, and when they shouldn't?
Yeah, I suppose if it causes harm or not.
Okay,
that
so
would be
if
a
it
good
causes
metric.
harm.
Yeah, if that belief causes harm or oppression of someone else, then I would be quite against it.
If you don't know whether a belief causes harm or not, where do you normally land?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think I have enough responsibility making sure I'm doing no harm, that I don't really go out and seek out and sleuth what other people are doing unless it's in my face, in my home, in my presence. And then I speak up when I have the courage and the knowledge to be able to do so, or have conversations, and start to explore that. But I certainly don't go seeking out. Yeah, I think people better qualified than I am.
Right. Yeah. I guess what I'm trying to ask is, if you don't know if
One way or the other.
If you don't know one way or the other, if the person at Comic-Con dressed up as a fairy who believes that fairies are real,
Mm-hmm.
if you don't know one way or the other whether that belief is causing harm or not, where do you start? Like, what's your default?
My default is to just give them the benefit of the doubt that they're just enjoying themselves and are eccentric. And if I saw evidence to the contrary, I might, depending on what my position was, I mean, if they were causing harm in front of me, I think I'd feel the need to step in or bring it to someone's attention that something was out of order.
So you would need to be shown that the belief is harmful, in order to take the position that you would not want them to believe, to hold the belief that they do.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
So you believe that their belief is harmless until shown that it's harmful. Like, that's your default?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, and maybe that's irresponsible of me, but there's a lot of fucking people to keep up with,
Yeah.
with a lot of different beliefs.
Yeah. I guess I'm on the other side of the fence of that.
Mm-hmm.
My default is, if I know that somebody is believing something that isn't true, I take the position that it would be my preference if they didn't hold a false belief rather than to hold a false belief.
You want to stamp it out. This nonsense. So if you had a child, would you do the tooth fairy Santa Claus thing? Or?
I've thought about this.
Have you? Yeah,
I've thought about this a lot.
You fucking have.
I've thought about this a lot.
Yeah.
Because about the Santa Claus thing.
It's flight of fancy.
On the one hand, I wouldn't want to lie to my kids.
Yeah.
I don't want my kids to believe things that are not true. However, and again, I don't have kids, so it's hard for me to put myself in that situation. If I ever had kids, I could be completely different about this.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't have that advantage of knowing what parenting is like. So you can't hold me. Santa Claus is a tricky one because on the one hand, and not having the experience of being a parent, it's hard to kind of say what I would or wouldn't do as a parent. But currently, the way I feel right now is I wouldn't want to lie to my kids.
Yeah.
I don't want my kids to believe things that aren't true. However, I think there's value in playing the Santa Claus game as a lesson to your kids that even your parents can lie to you. Don't take what I say as truth necessarily. Have better reasons than my dad says Santa Claus is true, therefore Santa Claus is true.
Wow.
I would want them to investigate for themselves and say, my dad tells me that Santa Claus is true. Does that mean Santa Claus is real? So it would be an interesting game to play with them, with the motivation of it being behind it being a lesson in don't believe me because I say so.
Get some evidence.
Yeah. Even your own dad can lie to you.
How old were you when you sort of realized Santa Claus was mom and dad?
I don't know how old I was.
Did you bought into it for some time though? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And there was benefit. It was beneficial to continue to display behavior that convinced my parents that I still believed in Santa Claus.
So what they taught you was lying to them had some benefit.
Yeah.
That seems like a good argument for not doing that shit.
Yeah. So I see value in both things. I would at this point, I would probably not say that Santa Claus is real.
Yeah.
I would probably not do that.
Say, here's your gifts. You're welcome.
Yeah.
Mom got you this. Dad got you this.
Yeah.
Uncle Joey got you this.
Yep. But I think there's value in teaching that lesson.
Yeah.
That, I've been telling you for 17 years that Santa Claus is real. Santa Claus is not real. And what I want you to take away from this is that even if I'm convinced of something and I'm trying to convince you of something, I want you to have better reasons to believe it than because my dad says so. So there's my Santa Claus. What do you think about that?
What do I think about you using Santa Claus as a lesson for your kids in here's the real world, kids?
What do you think of the value of playing the Santa Claus game in that way?
Yeah, when you first put forth the motion, I thought, well, that's an interesting idea. Feels a bit scientific, a bit, giving your 3-year-old a Street Epistemology onesie, instead of a toy. Bedtime stories of but I see your point. I think there's other ways of doing it, and for me, I think the magic that's inherent in creating that illusion for the first 6, 8, 9
years
32 years of a child's life is pretty special. And I think it's probably why I like the Comic-Con, the cosplay people.
Fantasy. I love fantasy. Fantasy has a great place in society, literature. It helps us dream and think of things that maybe aren't possible, that just gives us the idea, that generates, well, how can I make this possible? So I'm not dismissing fantasy of it being some worthless thing that we should never have. I appreciate it. I like Star Wars, Star Trek, a lot of the like Marvel comic movies and stuff. I think they're great. But I think there's a lot of importance in being able to tell the difference between fantasy and reality.
Yeah.
And I think exploring these questions helps develop better questions that help people maybe better understand the difference between those two.
Yeah, that's an important role. I mean, as much as I do enjoy people that fuzzy the line, there's definitely a responsibility to have some clear lines there as well, and it's helpful to have, if a bit clinical, but. Happy Christmas.